Welcome to Critical Issues, Alternative Views. I'm Ron Kramer, Professor of Sociology at Western Michigan University, and I serve as the host for the program. Joining me today are our two regular viewmeisters. On my right is Denise Keele. Denise is from the Department of Political Science at Western Michigan University, and she's also affiliated with the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. I got it right this time.
Good job.
Denise also serves as the chair of the Working Group on Climate Change at the university, which will be getting revved up again real soon here. We're almost ready to head back to school.
Yes.
On my left is Don Cooney. Don is a professor in the School of Social Work at Western Michigan University, and Don also serves as a Kalamazoo City Commissioner. Well, we've been off for a while. We've been on a bit of a summer hiatus here. We've all been traveling a bit. And thank goodness not much happened during the summer, right? Not in the political world. Well, actually, obviously quite a bit has happened. So we were trying to figure out what to talk about today, and there are just so many issues. But we thought we would start with the news this week concerning the Donald Trump associates who were convicted. Paul Manafort, who served as the campaign manager for Trump, was convicted in a federal court in Virginia. 8 counts out of the 18, and apparently there was one lone voter that held out and made sure that they didn't get convicted on all 18 counts, but he was convicted on 8 counts, bank fraud and just a whole bunch of other things. And the most interesting case, though, I think, is Michael Cohen, who was Donald Trump's personal attorney. He went into a federal court in New York and pled guilty also to 8 counts. And 2 of the counts, interestingly, had to do with making illegal campaign contribution payments to one, a porn star, Stormy Daniels, and the other, a former Playmate model, Karen McDougal. And as he made those guilty pleas under oath with the threat of perjury, and did you hear the judge do the little ceremony before accepting the guilty plea? Very, very intense and thorough, even to the point of, have you had anything to drink today or even last night? And I mean, just painstakingly went through to make sure everybody understands, because when you accept a guilty plea, you have to establish on the record that the defendant is doing this voluntarily and they're doing it intelligently, which means they know what they're doing, they know they're giving up important trial rights that are afforded to them under the Constitution. And so it was a very painstaking examination of Cohen, and Cohen was very forthright and made a statement. But Cohen basically said, yes, I did this, and I did it at the direction of a candidate for federal office, which was, of course, Donald Trump. And again, it explained how the payments were made and how he was personally reimbursed, and that it was the Trump organization that then reimbursed him. And so it was a very clear signal that there's a lot going on with regard to that particular issue. And it clearly shows that here, so this was the first time in American history, as far as we can tell, that someone confessed in a federal court that they committed a felony at the direction of the President of the United States.
Wow.
All right, Denise, what do you make of these convictions?
I'll start with that end statement, because this is more than anyone ever had on Nixon. Right? And he resigned over way less than we now have on federal court record about implicating Trump in campaign finance. And so maybe it's not the offense that we would like to have Trump implicated in, but Al Capone went down for tax fraud.
That's right.
Okay, and so this is a legitimate way to get at this white-collar crime and to get at this really systematic level of criminal and corruptive activity, and from the Trump Foundation over many, many years. So I think that is an incredible piece of American history to have in federal court on the record implicating a sitting president, which, by the way, the crime is about how you got to be president. Right?
Right,
so,
because the purpose of the payment was to influence the election.
Influence the election.
That was another point that Cohen made very clear.
Yes.
We made these payments to silence these women because we knew if they were allowed to speak out, it might unduly influence the
Right.
election. It might cost Donald Trump the election.
Right. Yeah. So, and just one other point on the Manafort verdicts. You know, there's been a lot of talk, well, 8 out of 18, and about this one juror. We have one juror who's gone and done some interviews and said there was a holdout. One juror, they spent many hours trying to convince this person to get guilty counts on all of them. There's an interesting way to think about the counts, the 10 counts that are essentially in a mistrial now. And that is that almost all of those offenses have a state offense as well. If you file a federal false tax return, guess what? You also probably filed a state tax return. And the attorney generals in New York and Virginia and California all have some rights to that. And I think something else in Illinois as well.
Because of the bank
because of
that
the
he
bank
tried to
that
get
he
got
used.
the loan from.
So, you know, I think that mistrial, you know, maybe opens the door to state-level prosecutions of Manafort in many of those cases. New York is the only state that has kind of a double jeopardy rule that might apply to some of those state crimes. But those are things that then Trump can't pardon.
Right.
He can only pardon federal offenses. So I feel like there might still be some attorney generals who will be very interested in the furtherance of some of those other Manafort charges. But I think Mueller kind of knew that. I think they've been very, very smart. When I first read the list of charges, I thought, how come you're not bundling these with the state? And I think we learned today why he's not bundling them with the state, because it leaves open this possibility for state attorney generals and then an unpardonable offense. Of course, Manafort has another trial coming up in about a month in D.C., and that's for the foreign affairs, being an agent of foreign affairs. And that all has yet to come up.
Right.
So I think folks will kind of wait maybe and see what happens with his second round of indictments. But I wouldn't be surprised if many of these tax things came up at the state level again for him. He's already like going to do 80 years or something.
Yeah.
So.
Looking at
Well, in New York, haven't they already said they're going to go after Cohen?
The Southern District of New York has already said that they are going to do this at the state level, because that's where the Trump Organization is. And New York is interesting. So you might remember a name, a little flashback, Leona Helms, the hotel magnate woman. So New York State changed their laws about double jeopardy after her because they were so mad at her taking them for all those tax dollars. And so they do have some interesting provisions about what they can go back and get for at the state level for folks in New York. And they particularly, New York allows you to use other convictions in this long history of criminal activity and corruption against that person in their state trial. So there could be a lot of interesting things which may lead to more information about the Trump Organization and the classic who knew what and when, right? Questions that we're interested in all the way to the top.
Well, a couple other things. The key phrase, at the direction of.
Yes.
Now, the evidence of that is his testimony, and he has this phone recording.
audio tape,
Audio tape, which is kind of cryptic. I mean, I don't know if it's that clear. So that's what, did he have to do that? Why did he do that? Why did he say at the direction of? I mean, he deliberately brought Trump into this whole thing. That's an interesting piece to me. And to combine that with the fact that the next day, his lawyer goes every place he could get to in the media to say, we got a lot of other stuff here that's going to be very uncomfortable, that Mueller will be very interested in. So what's going on here with that? That part's really interesting.
It's almost like they're begging Robert Mueller to come and make a deal with them.
Right.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
and some have speculated, well, why hasn't Mueller done that already? And it may be that Mueller already has all the evidence he needs with regard to those issues, and he doesn't, and he still wants to target Cohen as well, and so doesn't want to offer him a deal because he's got enough evidence already. He's got enough on Trump as it is on that score, on that particular
Well, and that
issue,
would make sense. So in probably the most likely Trump-favored jury you could get, he had one holdout with the evidence that he showed. So, you know, get a new jury in California, in Virginia, in the southern, you know, on all of these issues,
Yeah.
that tells you your case was pretty darn strong.
Yeah.
You had one person really holding out, but
Right.
you convinced overwhelmingly all these other folks, and you reusing that evidence with different juries. I think that he doesn't have to make a deal.
And the one woman that has juror who has spoken out said she's a solid Trump supporter.
That's right.
She voted
Wow.
for Trump. She voted for him
That's
again.
right, yeah.
But she said, but the evidence was so overwhelming on
That
Manafort. I didn't
yeah.
want to convict him, but the evidence was so overwhelming, you had to, even though I'm a Trump supporter.
That's right.
Wow.
But that was an interesting comment.
That's
Very
right.
much
Now,
so.
some people are arguing, well, it's just Cohen's word against Trump's.
Yes.
But that's not necessarily true.
Right.
Because we have that audio recording, there's other physical evidence that was seized
Right.
by the FBI. And we also have people within the Trump organization
Yes.
who facilitated the payment,
Right.
the reimbursement to
That's
Michael
right, yeah.
Cohen for making the payment to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal.
That's right.
So there's more corroboration there. Plus, interestingly enough, the publisher of
Yes,
the
that's
National
Yes.
Enquirer,
Yes.
what is it, American Media Incorporated, and they published the National Enquirer. His name is David Pecker, and the word came out yesterday that Mr. Pecker has been granted immunity from prosecution to tell what he knows. Now, the audio tape does mention our friend David and the information that
right,
he has,
right.
because
Yes.
the situation with the McDougal was that the National Enquirer bought her
That's right.
story
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then killed it.
What they
Wouldn't
call catch and kill.
catch and
Catch and
kill.
kill.
So
Yeah.
they had the rights to her story, but
Yes.
locked it up in a safe and weren't going to publish it to protect Donald
know.
Trump. And so they were paid to
Right.
get
Yeah.
the rights to that story.
Right. Well, and importantly, Pecker now has broad immunity. There's all sorts of different levels of immunity that a prosecutor can give, and this was a very general, broad issue. Basically, anything you say, we're not going to try to charge you with anything. So whatever is in that actual vault, as
Yeah.
I understand
Right.
it, we don't know. And this is interestingly enough why there was a quick tweet by the President Trump, that, well, we should make plea deals, illegal.
He's upset about flipping.
He's very upset about this as
yeah.
what the most longest in criminal
The
justice
flippers.
strategy
These
ever,
flippers,
right?
yeah. So the question for me is, why does Pecker need all this immunity? What's he got?
Well,
that
because
would-
exactly.
he's violated. We don't know any of that.
Right,
No.
right.
Well, I think the strongest word one could use would be blackmail. Once you own that information, I'm sure he might have asked for some other things.
Okay.
Would be my guess, right? I own all this information, and you're going to maybe pay me for it again, but I'm probably going to use that to my advantage in several other ways, right?
Wow.
And there-
So that would be my guess, but who knows?
And there are still other audio tapes, apparently, that Cohen
Right.
created.
Right.
So we haven't heard those yet.
Right.
But the point that I wanted to make is that it's not just Cohen's word against Trump here. There is corroborating evidence.
That's right.
And again, I think when Trump gave his interview the other day and was complaining about flipping, he made it sound as if people just out of the blue decide, I'm
Right.
gonna flip on you, Denise. I'm gonna tell a bunch
Exactly.
of lies about you to get
Just
you in
to
trouble.
get,
Yeah.
Well, that's not how it works.
No.
Prosecutors aren't going to just use any unsubstantiated, uncorroborated evidence
No.
that some guy
No.
brings to them and to try to
That's
get a
right.
deal.
Right.
They only make a deal if they need to make a deal to go after someone else who
That's
they
right.
don't have the evidence against yet, but they have evidence on this person, and any evidence that that person provides then
That's right,
is
yeah.
going to have to be vetted and corroborated, and it's not just like you can go in and tell a whole bunch of lies and get off, right?
No, because you know this better than me, but it seems that they have to convince a jury.
That's right.
And so they want to make sure that this guy's authentic, what he's
right.
saying. They're very careful about
Yeah,
that.
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that did seem to be a bit of a problem in the Manafort trial, because Gates,
Yes.
who was an
Didn't come off
associate,
as a
didn't
particularly
come off very
convincing
well.
witness, apparently,
And,
because of taking a plea deal, which is always something to
yeah.
take into account, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well,
So maybe a couple questions about all of that, things that I'm thinking about. How is this going to affect the midterms?
Right.
Do
Exactly.
you continue to go for impeachment? Is that a good or bad strategy? for Democrats and the blue wave,
I've heard that the nationals are telling the locals, don't touch
to
impeachment.
don't touch impeachment. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, because that will further invigorate the Trump base is the idea, and that you go, these charges are going to stick, and we go where we can on these crimes, but to likely not bring up impeachment, right, in the short term, which is a hard thing,
Right.
only because you want that to not actually affect.
But I think that Democratic candidates can very honestly and legitimately deal with that question by
Yes.
saying, well, we have evidence that the president committed a felony,
Right.
but we're still waiting to hear the Mueller report.
Yes.
And we really can't start to talk
Right.
about this until we get the Mueller report and find out
Right.
what other evidence there is. And
Right.
so impeachment may be an issue in the future, but right now
That's
we
right.
have to wait until
There you
we
go.
get
Every
further
candidate
evidence.
should. There you go. There's your answer.
There
Well
it
said.
No, I think that's what Democrats have to do. Now,
I do.
what I think has to happen is that Republican candidates have to be pressed on this.
That's right.
So Fred Upton,
Yes, Fred.
what do you
what's your
think
stand on
about,
this?
If
you
he
know,
will ever agree to a debate or a public
Well,
town hall.
I know this, that.
I know it's been challenged. It's been
he-
invited.
I know that right after the election, Matt had reacted to something Fred talked about.
Yes.
And Fred wrote back and said, look, I just want to talk about something serious like health care. So Matt, the next day, went to his office with 6 dates
Yes.
for each of the 6 counties and said, I want to debate in each of these areas.
Yes.
With dates he gave them. So now it's on the table, and
Right.
he has to respond to that.
well, let me pause here
Yeah,
and
and-
invite Fred Upton. Anytime,
Please.
Fred, that you would
Yes.
like to
Right
come
here.
on
We would
critical
love him.
issues, we would love to have you as a
Absolutely.
guest. We've
Absolutely.
invited Matt Longjohn, and Matt Longjohn has agreed to come on at some point. We're just
We're
trying
gonna
to
work
figure
out a date, yes.
the appropriate date. We extend an invitation to you,
Absolutely.
Fred
Right.
Upton, to come and be on critical issues. We'd love to have you here, and we would be very kind to you and ask
Yes.
you. But
Yes.
we have some tough questions
Yes.
to ask you. But again, Fred Upton has a history of not responding to those kind of invitations.
Right.
I've invited him by letter on a number of occasions to come to the working group on climate
Yes.
change. He never acknowledges that he even received the letter. We've invited him to come on this show before. We've invited him to come to town halls. And Fred just, he avoids.
Yes.
Right, I
He
invited him to
avoids-
come to my class during the primary season, and
Because you invite every candidate
I
who's
did.
running for
I
exactly.
invited them, and the Democrats came,
Right.
but
And he
didn't.
generally tries to avoid debating
Yes.
any candidates that are against him. Now, you managed to get him into a debate,
2.
and maybe that's the reason why he doesn't want to debate, because he didn't come off very well on those debates against you. I didn't think.
That was fun.
But he has avoided debates, and so
Yes.
and this is really a critical issue. I mean, this is an important
Yep.
election, and there are some very important issues that we need to know where Fred stands on these issues, and one of them has to do with impeachment. The House of Representatives has the responsibility to initiate impeachment proceedings.
Right.
It's probably going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. I mean, I really think that the Mueller report, when it comes in, is going to be damning.
Yeah.
It's going to be very damning. It's going to show extensive collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians to try to influence the election. I think it's going to provide damning evidence of that, extensive evidence of that. I think it's also going to make an extremely strong case that Donald Trump engaged in obstruction of justice. I think we could make that case just
Yeah, right,
based
that's
on
not too
Trump's
hard.
own public
There's some
statement.
plain
easy.
evidence in sight.
There's plain evidence
for
on that, and
And like you started the show with, we have one of the strongest statements ever in the federal court record that directed by the president.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
serious,
Nancy
huh?
Pelosi said yesterday, though, that any effort toward impeachment has to be bipartisan. Both, they got to jump on board. It's not going to be just the Democrats pushing for that. It's got to
Yes.
be the Republicans jumping in.
And that's why I think it's important to ask people like Fred Upton,
Absolutely.
where do you
Yes.
stand on this?
right.
We already have clear evidence presented in a federal court that the President of the United States directed a federal felony for the purpose
Right.
of influencing the election. So we know that there's that evidence
right.
already. We're pretty sure that the Mueller report is going to provide additional evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors that
That's
Donald
right.
Trump has engaged in. And so where do you stand on this, Fred Upton?
Yes.
You know, are you prepared
Yeah.
to discuss impeachment or to
Exactly.
consider it? Would you vote for impeachment if the Mueller report does present damning evidence of obstruction of justice and collusion with the Russians to influence the election? Where does he stand on this? Now,
Yeah.
I'm sure Matt Longjohn is going to be asking him these questions during the campaign, and if he does get the debates, but we need to have that. We need to get Fred on the record about what
That's
he would
right.
do on this.
Yeah. I'm interested. What do you think Mueller's going to do between now and the election?
You're right.
Do you think he's going to step back, or is he going to continue to push forward?
Well, that is the $10 million question, because there are not formal laws, but a lot of guidelines and rules, right, that say we shouldn't push for investigations like this around elections, that we do not want to be influencing elections. Comey pretty much broke that rule
Right. Oh, he definitely
2
did.
years ago, and I think there's still some small amount of the election results that we can say are because of that. So, whether they're going to stick with that and wait till after the we're getting very close. We're 70 some odd days out to the midterm, right? And so there's sort of an implicit 60-day rule. So, that these things are coming out now. I think you're right that the rest of this is going to come out after the election, and I think it's because of the politics of it, which begs an even bigger question. So both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, would like to probably not talk about impeachment for the next 2 months, right? Republicans, because they've been supportive of Trump, and we are right to say press them on that particular question. And Democrats, too, because everyone fears the backlash.
Yeah.
Right, of the supporters. So the other question that is big to me then is, why is there continued support for Trump from his base out there? And it's enough that everyone is sort of fearful of that, so that they don't want to look like they're influencing their election or losing because they have enraged that particular base.
I just keep going back to what Trump said during the election. I could shoot somebody in the middle of Times Square, it wouldn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And I think with most of his supporters, that's still the case.
That's still true.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
So if Mueller times the report for after the election, right after the election, where now a couple of things could happen. Number one, we could have the blue wave, and the Democrats could take control of at least the House, if not the Senate. And but I think it's true that impeachment's not going to happen unless it's a bipartisan effort.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the Fred Uptons of the world, if Fred would manage to survive and be reelected, he would have to be one of the people to participate in this. Now, if it's right after the election, they're at the point where they have maximum protection.
That's right.
And could actually go ahead, perhaps, and have some protection from the electorate.
That's right.
That base.
In that last,
to do it in that time frame. So if Mueller produces his report in December or in January, and then will the Fred Uptons of the world step up if as expected? I mean, I'm just speculating here, but I'm expecting the Mueller report to be damning and convincing and beyond a reasonable doubt in terms of high crimes and misdemeanors engaged in by Trump in his campaign.
Well, one thing that might accelerate the process is this next trial for Manafort, because it's international stuff.
That's right.
And that could tie in collusion much more than these other two trials that just went on.
Yes.
Because he's had connections with, these Russian people that are very much into surveillance and things like that. And that might push things a little faster.
Right.
And Cohen does too.
Yes.
Cohen does too.
Cohen has information about that Trump Tower meeting with the Russians, and Cohen himself made trips to Russia. And so I think Cohen perhaps has also evidence to present to Mueller, and I think that's what his attorney was, Lanny Davis, was sort of angling for. Hey, Bob Mueller, come, we've got some stuff for you that you might be interested in. And so we'll have to see where that goes as well. Now, one other question here, and then I think maybe we can move on a little bit here, but what's Manafort going to do? Manafort's now been convicted. It's one thing to say, I'm not going to flip on the president, I'm not going to cave in. before,
Yeah.
but now he's convicted, and he's convicted of 8 counts, and he's looking at a for sure long prison
Ooh,
term.
yeah.
He's already incarcerated because he's a flight risk.
Yep.
So he's not getting out of jail anytime soon, and he's
Right.
going to go to prison for a very long period of time. He's got this other trial coming up as well.
Right.
That's only going to add to that. And I thought it was very interesting. After the trial, Manafort's lawyer wasn't talking about appeals or anything else.
No.
He says, we have to consider all of our options.
Yes.
So
What does that mean? Is one of those options that we are going to now cooperate to try to, because now he's got to do something to reduce that sentence, or
Yeah.
he's
That's
going
right.
The rest of
to
his
die
life.
in prison.
Easy.
Well, that's why I think it's important he thinks he's going to get pardoned eventually for these federal offenses
Yeah,
by
yeah.
Trump. Now, can Trump politically do that? You know, get away with doing that, and
That's
then
obstruction
that's
of
why I made the
What's
point of
the limit?
That's
Trump
why I
can
made
get
the
away
point of
with?
all the state pending
State
charges that could,
prosecutions,
which
yeah.
he, you know, now that these convictions are on the federal table, that same evidence in any of 4 state level courts would likely convict as
Yeah.
well. And then you don't get to go to, you know, Club Fed, you get to go to state prison. So I'm sure that's weighing a little bit heavily on his mind as well. And so I,
Maybe a trip up to Attica.
you know,
Yeah, he's
let's-
watching the strike that's going on, I think.
I
And
think
he's saying, go, you guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think that there might be an opportunity for him to finally flip
Yeah.
as well, right?
Pressure's tremendous.
Tremendous.
So where do we stand on the midterm elections right
Yes,
now? The
so-
impeachment issue we've talked about, that's going to be a critical issue. Democrats probably want to shy away from that at this point till they get the report from Mueller.
Right.
Republicans probably are going to be pressed on it. Where do you stand, Fred Upton, on this? What else do you see happening in terms of the 2018 midterms? Are we going to see the blue wave?
Here's the thing I think is really interesting. When Paul Clements ran, I don't know if it was his last time he ran or the time before, the turnout for the primary was 20,000 votes. This time the turnout for the primary was 60,000 votes.
That's right.
In this district. And that's the key. It's getting people to the polls. That's why what you're doing on campus is so very important. I think that's going to determine it. The people that stayed home last time
Yep.
and the potential voters that the Democrats have that are there for, they've got to mobilize those folks. Everything's going to depend on that.
So Democratic voters appear to be energized at this point, and they
Yes.
showed up in big numbers for the primary election, and if they do that in November, that could tip the
I
balance.
think so.
That's right.
Is that-
I would agree with that analysis. And we are seeing a ton of activity in Michigan with groups, not just at Western, mobilizing everyone to get out and vote. And I don't know that I've seen that kind of excitement
Right.
and energy and money
Yeah, there's
in
money.
this state to mobilize, even just to get out the vote, partisan or nonpartisan messages all across the board. And elections, any good political scientist will tell you, are based on turnout.
Right.
It's
and
always
I-
about turnout.
There's a couple things that I think really give incentive for people to go to the polls. One is the governor's race.
Yes.
I think that's really important because the Republican candidate is just what the Labor and the Democrats don't want in there. So they're ready.
right.
The second thing are the ballot proposals.
Correct.
I think they're very important and they could draw a lot of people out there.
Yes. So there are 2 big ballot proposals on the agenda that are really useful in motivating voters as well. We know from research that there are a lot of reasons why people don't vote, but one of them is that they really are, my vote doesn't matter.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there are 2 ballot proposals that it's kind of an interesting intuitive turn to say your vote on these proposals will make your vote actually matter more. And that's the anti-gerrymandering proposal here. And I have to get the wording of it right. The Independent Commission for Redistricting.
I don't
I'm missing a
remember the
word in
exact
there.
wording,
See,
I
we
don't
got
know.
some voter education to do to make sure you know what box you're
Yeah,
checking there.
right.
It's not going
Yeah.
to say gerrymandering, everybody. It's going to say, right, because that is about redrawing our district lines. People understand that their votes are being marginalized, and this here is a chance to vote for a proposal that will make your vote count even more. And the other one is promote the vote, which is about a lot of Michigan's laws about registering, what can be on a ballot approach, how to get signatures, absentee ballots. We're in probably the mid-range of being, I would say, restrictive out of all the states. You know, our laws about how we vote and making that easier for people to vote. So it's really been great to talk to students and say, well, why don't you vote? Well, it doesn't matter. I say that's maybe true, right? Like
Right
to
now.
honor that feeling
Yeah.
within them and say, and there are 2 ways that you can vote this time to change that.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's a circular argument you have to make,
Right.
but
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
found it to be pretty compelling so far.
So the promote the vote is to basically liberalize the
The
Participation
registration and participation, yes.
Okay.
Making it easier to do things like absentee ballot is a big one. There should be a no reason, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you need your ID, what it means to fill out that crazy affidavit, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to go a little bit farther in the future. I really like seeing things like that because our youth vote they have special challenges and hurdles. You know, they're moving every
Sure.
year.
Yeah.
Right,
And they,
right.
you know, they're changing that address and that polling place all the time.
How about
And it gets
same-day
confusing for them.
registration?
Same-day registration.
Is that in there?
Yes, so,
It is in there?
so
Oh, good.
being able to come in, yeah,
Register and vote on the same day.
exactly.
And again, this is a democracy.
That's right.
You know, you would think that people want to make it as easy to vote as possible to
That's
gain
right.
larger democratic participation in
That's right.
government, right?
That's right.
But of course, let's be honest, the Republican Party doesn't want that. The
No.
Republican Party knows that the only way they can win elections is to keep large numbers of
To
people from
suppress.
voting, to suppress the vote, to suppress the black vote,
That's
to
right.
suppress the youth
Exactly.
vote. And they do not want to see those kinds of changes made because
That's
they
right.
want to keep people from voting.
Yes.
The hell,
Right.
the heck with democracy,
Yeah.
they want to maintain power, and the only way they can maintain power and win elections is to gerrymander the
Yes.
districts and to restrict people from voting.
That's right.
And so they're going to fight tooth and nail, and they are fighting tooth and nail against these proposals.
Exactly.
They are.
They did.
Except, again, I would say not publicly. Organizing 2 great events with the help of many of our tech staff who are in these groups for voters, not politicians, and promote the vote to come to campus. And I put my diligent call or email in every week to the supposed opposition who will not come to the public events. So
So Denise, the We Vote initiative.
I can say that I have invited everybody who I think was against it or that filed lawsuits against particularly the gerrymandering, but no one will come say what you just said in public at
Yeah.
campus.
Now, the We Vote initiatives,
so-
can you just tell us a little bit about those?
Sure, we could do several shows. Maybe we'll have our student coordinators come
That'd be
on
good.
and,
That would be good.
and talk about their role and why they're so passionate. The good news is, I think they're called Gen Z now. Huh?
Oh.
Okay, there's a new.
Gen Z?
I've learned.
Okay.
I learned many things in the last couple of days from our 18-year-olds who are engaged and excited in the political process. So
Wow.
that is fantastic. And We Vote is the administration is gotten on board at Western with a budget and a full committee. Before it's been Don and a couple other faculty members, our colleague Ellen Webb in English, running some shoestring operations at time with 1 or 2 folks at the university. This year we got a committee of about 20 people and a nice budget to hire some coordinators, and we are focused on registration, education, and turnout. And athletics is involved this year. Our county clerks have been, and city clerk have been incredibly supportive. I think there's a 2-page list of events at this moment
Wow.
that we are out there doing. We'll be in residence life, in the dorms, in the dining halls.
Even in the classroom.
In the classrooms will be a huge push. I think we're about this close, I'll say it publicly, to getting a letter out, definitely from our faculty union and teaching assistant unions, and we hope the rest of the administration will be on board with also allowing faculty to, please don't schedule a test that day, be lenient on attendance on election day, and maybe even cancel class and go down to the polls. So,
Wonderful.
a lot of big changes in administrative level of support at Weston that I'm very thankful to have behind. There's bottom up and there's also top down in this effort, and that's when real change can happen. And this committee is intent on becoming institutionalized in the best sense of that word, and we're going to continue our work year round at this point. Working towards 2020, of course, but this is going to become a standing committee at the university that works year-round on efforts.
We should be educating our students on what it means to be a
It-
citizen in a democratic
Absolutely.
society, and voting
Absolutely.
is certainly one of the
It is the
responsibilities and requirements of citizenship.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So,
Great.
Yeah.
It's terrific effort. It's just exciting.
It's fun,
The
huh?
diversity of the people in the room I thought
Is-
was great.
yeah,
From so many different departments. Really great.
We're trying, huh? Yeah.
now, getting back to the 2018 midterms, we're talking about participation and voter turnout, but we also want to talk about candidates and issues to some extent. And I did mention that the Democratic candidate for the 6th Congressional District, Matt Longjohn, has
Right.
been invited,
Yep.
has accepted to come and be on this program.
Good.
And we're just
We've gotta
simply
find a
trying to
date.
find a date that will work to.
He's kind of busy, huh?
He's a little busy
But he's
right
more
now.
than willing to come talk with us, yes.
But I think the 6th district will be an interesting vote. It's not
Yes.
on the national radar right now as a district that people think the Democrats can flip. So I don't think right now people think Matt Longjohn can succeed in knocking off Fred Upton. But we'll see. I thought that Longjohn didn't have a chance in the primary, and he kind of roared to
He
victory
roared.
there.
Right.
And so
It was a tough primary.
it's a tough
and
primary, difficult. Lots of good people involved in
That's
that
right.
primary. It was
Very
difficult to
good
make a
people.
choice. I think all Democratic
Yes.
voters were like, "Ooh, we've got so many good candidates here. How do we
Right.
pick out of that good group?"
Yeah.
Right.
But Matt Longjohn did win, and we will have him on here again. We extended an invitation to Fred Upton to come
Yeah.
and be on the program also.
Yes.
But that's one issue or one election that we certainly want to look at, the gubernatorial race here in Michigan.
Senate.
Our state Senate seat
the
is also
Senate,
important.
Debbie Stabenow and
Well, that's our federal. So Debbie Stabenow, I think she has a much better chance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But at the state level, our current representative Margaret O'Brien, we invite you to come
Yes,
talk on this
we
show
would love Margaret.
as well, and the Democratic nominee Sean McCann for
Okay.
the
So
60.
lots of very interesting races coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe one issue that we could provide some clarity on
Yeah.
here. The term democratic socialist
Yeah.
has come up a lot, and I think primarily because Bernie Sanders very explicitly said that he was
Mm-hmm.
a democratic socialist when he ran for president in 2016. And since then, I think we've seen kind of, and some of this is, of course, in reaction to the Trump electoral victory, is that there's been kind of a resurgence of democratic socialist organizations and movements. There's a group called Democratic Socialists of America.
Yep.
They've seen a huge influx, particularly of young people,
Yes.
I think, into their ranks. They're very active. And then, of course, we had the primary election in New York, in the city of New York, where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who also was explicitly labeling herself as a democratic socialist, won the primary, knocked off a top ranking member of the Democratic
Yes.
Party in the House,
Yep.
and is pretty much guaranteed that she will be going to Congress. We've also had for the battle for the John Conyers seat over in Detroit, we have another woman. I don't know if Rashida Tlaib explicitly identifies as a democratic socialist, but she certainly takes very progressive
Right.
positions on most of the issues. So what does it mean to say that you're a democratic socialist? Is that something that, I know some people react in horror to
Yeah.
that. Other people find that to be a very attractive ideological positions. But what does it mean to be a democratic socialist?
I'm going to let Don.
Well, I'm a
'cause
member of the
he is
Democratic
one.
Socialists of America, and I've been there since they started. I've been a member.
Yeah.
And you may remember, Ron, we brought Michael Harrington here to speak,
Yes.
who was the founder of the Democratic
Wonderful
Socialists of America.
man, one of the most decent men we've ever met, right?
Wonderful guy, wonderful guy. The Democratic Socialists of America, I can talk about socialism, I can talk about Democratic Socialists. Democratic Socialists of America want to be the left wing of the Democratic Party. They say, okay, the way the system is set up, a third party doesn't have much of a chance at all,
Right.
practically none. And so if you really want to be in the game, you got to be in one of the parties. And if you're going to be in one of the parties, the choice is obvious. But socialism, I think, means two things. It means democracy, political and economic democracy. It means that we should take serious what we say, government of, by, and for the people, so that the people should rule. So that's the political part of it. And then the economic part of it is that the resources that are created in the country should equitably be distributed, and that people should share in the wealth of the country, which is far from where we are now. So whatever we can do to move in that direction, I think that's what democratic socialists are fighting for.
Okay, okay.
I think it's interesting to see Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and some of the younger folks, even Abdul in our Democrat primary for
Yes, he
Michigan,
did, yes.
identified with this. There seems to be a real generational gap in using that word socialism, right? And
Yeah.
so our older voters still see that in the Cold War definition and have this immediate,
Right.
instant,
Soviet
negative
Union.
connotation of that worm. And our millennials and our, again, new Gen Zs see that in exactly the way that you just described it, Don, and the issues that are important to them are equity and fairness and justice for all.
Yeah.
And then they see that word as not having all this baggage, and that it is a progressive word to them. So I think you're also seeing this internal fight within the generations of the
That's
party.
right.
You know, and my reaction to that word is very, very different depending on my age.
Yeah, right. I think that there are some people, there are different definitions. It's not a univocal concept.
Absolutely.
It's very much a different. There are people who call themselves socialists who say we want to overturn the whole system. We want to get rid of capitalism.
Right.
There are other people who say, okay, Robert Reich is one of them, that capitalism is here and it's an international system, and what we have to do is make capitalism work for everybody. Change the nature of capitalism. That's what Reich is saying. And he's a democratic socialist.
Right.
And that's the direction that a lot of people are going. But other people are saying, no, we got to get rid of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's a tough job.
Yeah.
The term social democracy
Right.
is used a lot, particularly in Europe.
Yes.
And what it describes is our left political parties that accept capitalism as the economic system, but argue for a greater role for the state
Right.
in regulating capitalism
Yes.
and regulating the excesses and the
Right.
flaws of capitalism. And so, for example, if we would talk about Sweden or Denmark, those are not socialist countries in the
Right.
sense that they are still capitalist countries.
Exactly.
Their
Yes.
economic system
Yes.
is based on private ownership of the means
Yes.
of production. It's still a capitalist society. What's different about those countries, however, is the role of government.
Right.
That's right.
The government plays a much larger role. People pay taxes, but they
Right.
also get enormous benefits
Enormous.
from the state.
Right.
And so the state regulates the capitalist firms, but it also provides an array of social services and supports to its people.
Right.
Right.
Which allows them to gain an education and find jobs and
Healthcare.
get health
Have
care
exactly.
and
Have clean water.
Clean water.
clean water. And on almost every measure, those societies do much, much, much better than we do
Yes.
in the United
Yes.
States.
And they're much happier. The people are much happier.
Yeah.
Right.
So now, to me, that's what Bernie Sanders was
Yeah.
talking
Yes.
about. When he
Yes.
said democratic socialism, I
Yes.
think he was talking about a kind of Scandinavian style social democracy.
Right.
Where, again, capitalism is still accepted as the
Right.
economic system. I never heard Bernie Sanders say he wanted to demolish capitalism,
Right.
right? Or overthrow capitalism.
That's right.
But he did say that he was a democratic socialist, which meant, to me, meant he wanted to see that expanded,
Right.
positive, progressive role that government can play in society.
Yeah.
Because an unadorned capitalism is a disaster.
Right,
It creates
right,
massive
unregulated.
economic inequalities. It creates massive environmental destruction. It
Right.
doesn't provide health care and education to people. It exploits workers. And so
Right.
if it's an unrestrained capitalist economic system, it produces all kinds of social harms. And so the role of government is to restrain the worst impulses of that economic system and to make sure that we have clean water, people get educated, people get health care, and that, to me, so that's social democracy, but the term democratic socialist then shades over. Now, a lot of democratic socialists would say capitalism is the core problem. You've got to get to the root of the problem. There has to be a transition to a different kind of economic system which allows people greater participation in economic decision making, right? So we have, supposedly we have political democracy. Democratic socialists are arguing for economic democracy, a greater ability for workers and consumers and the public in general to have a say in the major economic decisions about investment and distribution and regulation. And so, but there's a tension there.
There's a tension
clearly
there.
a tension
And also, one of the things that adds to the tension here, I think, is the way we have a winner-take-all system. Because the Social Democratic Party in Germany, for example, can, if they get like 10% of the vote, they can have seats in the deciding party, the legislative body. You can't do that here. You got to get 51% of the vote, or else you don't get anything. So, you know, talking about, it's easier for them to talk about democratic socialism because they can see it embodied in a political party.
That's right. And it's also the number one question of political science is what is the role of government?
Right.
Yes.
And Americans would have a fundamentally different answer to that than our European and other what we might call Western nations, right? Still in America, the role of government is to be limited, even among Democrats, right? This idea that I'm an individual and that most of my life circumstances are dictated by my actions rather than the collective. That's still a prevailing belief, cultural belief in the States. And so that hinders this ability for us to see the role of government in a more favorable light.
And we've had a 40-year campaign to demonize government, right? Starting with the so-called Reagan Revolution, we've had a very serious and sustained effort to demonize government, to say government can't do anything right, that government's always oppressive, and to really, and that because of electoral victories and because of the success of producing that ideology, it's been very, very effective.
That's right.
And then the other baggage, of course, is that people often associate socialism, even the term democratic socialism, with the Soviet Union. And of course, who wants the great bureaucratic, authoritarian, top-down system that was the Soviet Union? That was not socialist at all.
No.
Except for perhaps some notion of nationalizing the means of production, but it certainly didn't allow for democratic participation either in economic decision making or in the political process. So it was as far away from democratic socialism as you could possibly get. So, but we have that baggage as well.
We have that baggage, and especially in older America. But so the second political science question is who benefits from that system of saying the government is ineffective and is going to take away your rights, and you're an individual.
Let's see, the wealthy, large corporations.
So somehow, that story isn't being told effectively enough, because that is another American value we should be able to tap into. That the corporate welfare.
Well, we just have 2 minutes left in the program, so I guess just to kind of sum up today, we live in interesting times, right? With the Trump administration and all the legal difficulties. It's really tough to predict, sitting here in late August, to predict what's going to happen in the 2018 election, let alone what's going to happen in the legal realm. But we will continue to monitor that. I really think so much depends on the Mueller report and how the Republicans in the Congress will react to the Mueller report. And of course, the Trump administration and his allies are doing everything they can to demonize the Mueller investigation and the Justice Department and the justice system, hoping to undermine this whole process. So, final thoughts. We have 1 minute.
Oh boy, I don't know how to get to a final thought. I just think that this is a time when people can make a real difference, and they really got to get involved.
Get out there and vote. All right, again, thank you for joining us on Critical Issues, Alternative Views. We hope you come back and see us again next time. Thanks.